I need a horse.
Sybil, no. I will send a rider.
What rider? The messenger can barely stand. Your men are scattered across 40 miles of farmland. The British have burned Danbury, and you need to stay here to organize the muster when they arrive. There is no one else, Father. I know the roads. I know the farms. I know where your men live.
You are 16 years old. It is raining. It is the middle of the night. There are cowboys and skinners on those roads. Bandits. Loyalists. If they catch you, they will not care that you are a girl.
Then they had better not catch me.
Welcome back to After Hours. I am Vaughn. Everyone knows Paul Revere, The Midnight Ride, the poem by Longfellow, one if by land, two if by sea. It is one of the most famous stories in American history. Paul Revere rode approximately 13 miles on the night of April 18, 1775. He rode with two other men. He was captured by the British before he reached Concord. Another rider, Samuel Prescott, finished the job. 2 years later, on the night of April 26, 1777, a 16-year-old girl climbed onto a horse in Putnam County, New York, and rode 40 miles. Alone. In the rain. In the dark. Through territory crawling with British loyalists, bandits, and outlaws. She was not a soldier. She was not a messenger. She was the eldest daughter of a militia colonel who needed his 400 men assembled by dawn and had no one else to send. Her name was Sybil Ludington. She rode 3 times the distance of Paul Revere. She rode alone. She was 16, and almost nobody has ever heard of her. This is episode 12, The Ride. On April 25, 1777, 1,800 British soldiers under Major General William Tryon landed at Campo Beach in what is now Westport, Connecticut. They came by ship. They marched inland through a light rain. Their target was Danbury, Connecticut, where the Continental Army had stored a massive supply depot. The supplies at Danbury were everything an army needs to survive. 4,000 barrels of beef and pork, 1,000 barrels of flour, 5,000 pairs of shoes, more than 1,000 tents, barrels of rum, sugar, coffee, and medicines. It was one of the largest supply caches in the Northern Theater. The British reached Danbury before any organized defense could be mounted. They set fire to the warehouses. They set fire to private homes. And then they found the rum. The soldiers drank. Discipline collapsed. Fires spread. By the morning of April 26th, Danbury was a smoking ruin. 40 miles to the west, in the hills of Putnam County, New York, Colonel Henry Ludington commanded the 7th Regiment of the Dutchess County Militia. 400 volunteer soldiers. Farmers, blacksmiths, shopkeepers, men who kept their muskets over their fireplaces and their powder dry in the barn. They were not professional soldiers. They were citizens who could be called to arms when needed. The problem was that it was planting season. The men were scattered across the county on their farms, preparing the soil for spring crops. There was no barracks, no central camp. The regiment existed on paper and in the loyalty of 400 men who lived miles apart from each other. Around 9 o'clock on the night of April 26th, a messenger staggered up to the Ludington farm. He was covered in mud. He was exhausted. He had ridden hard from Connecticut with the news.
Colonel, Danbury is burning. The British have destroyed the supply depot. Everything is gone. General Tryon has 1,800 men. They are still in the area.
How far?
40 miles east. Maybe less. They will try to reach their ships at the coast.
Then we must intercept them. But my men are scattered. I need them here by dawn.
Colonel Ludington looked at the messenger. The man could barely stand. He did not know the local roads. He could not ride another mile. Ludington had 12 children. Sybil was the eldest. She was 16 years old. She had turned 16 just 3 weeks earlier, on April 5th. She knew the roads. She knew the farms. She knew where every militiaman in her father's regiment lived, and she was the only person available to ride. Sybil climbed onto her horse in the pouring rain. The night was black. No moon, no lanterns, just the sound of rain hammering the trees in the darkness ahead. She carried a long stick. It served two purposes. She could bang on farmhouse doors without dismounting, and she could defend herself if she had to. The route she had to ride was 40 miles of winding country roads through territory that was anything but safe. The region was infested with loyalist raiders called cowboys and roving bandits called skinners, who preyed on travelers regardless of their allegiance. British sympathizers were everywhere. And somewhere to the east, 1,800 British soldiers were still on the march.
South first. Carmel. Then Mahopac. Then west to the Falls. Then north to Kent Cliffs. Farmers' Mills. Stormville. Then home.
She rode south to the village of Carmel. She banged on doors with her stick.
Muster at the Ludington farm. The British have burned Danbury. Colonel Ludington calls his regiment. Muster at the farm.
Then south to Mahopac. More doors. More sleeping farmers dragged from their beds by a 16-year-old girl on horseback in the rain. West to Mahopac Falls. North to Kent Cliffs. Each farm, each house, the same message. The British have burned Danbury. Your colonel needs you. Grab your musket. Get to the farm.
Muster. Muster at Ludington's. The regulars have burned Danbury. Muster now.
She was soaked. The rain did not stop. The roads were mud. Her horse slipped on the wet ground. She could see nothing ahead of her, navigating by memory, by the feel of the road under the horse's hooves, by the shape of trees she had passed 1,000 times in daylight. North to Farmers' Mills. Then further north to Stormville, the farthest point from home. Every mile she rode took her deeper into the darkness and further from safety. Every crossroad was a potential ambush. Every shadow could be a loyalist patrol. And then she turned south, back the way she came, 40 miles total, through the same rain, the same dark roads, the same danger. Sybil Ludington rode back into her father's farmyard at dawn. She was drenched. She was exhausted. Her horse was lathered and breathing hard. She had been riding for the better part of 8 hours. And standing in the farmyard, muskets in hand, were nearly 400 men.
Sybil, my God, you did it!
They are here, Father. They are all here.
Every man she had reached had come. Farmers had left their plows in the field, grabbed their weapons, and marched through the night to the Ludington farm. By sunrise, the 7th Regiment of the Dutchess County Militia was assembled and ready to fight. They arrived too late to save Danbury. The town was already destroyed. But on April 27, the militia from New York joined Connecticut forces and engaged the British at the Battle of Ridgefield, as Tryon tried to retreat to his ships. General David Wooster attacked the British rear guard, but was mortally wounded. Benedict Arnold, this was before his treason, identified a natural choke point and fortified it. The Americans, now numbering about 400, inflicted heavy casualties on the British and forced them to fight their way back to the coast. The British retreated to their ships and sailed away. They never attempted another deep raid into Connecticut. And the burning of Danbury, far from demoralizing the Patriots, enraged them. Neutral citizens who had been sitting out the war picked up their muskets and joined the cause. The British destruction of civilian property turned fence-sitters into fighters. All because 400 men showed up at dawn. All because a 16-year-old girl rode 40 miles in the rain to tell them it was time. Let me tell you what happened next. Or rather, what did not happen. Paul Revere rode 13 miles on the night of April 18, 1775. He was captured by the British before he reached his destination. Another rider completed the mission, and in 1860, 85 years later, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote a poem about him. Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. That poem made Revere immortal. Sybil Ludington rode 40 miles, alone, in the rain. At age 16, 3 times Revere's distance, she was not captured. She completed her mission. 400 men mustered by dawn, and for over 100 years, almost nobody wrote a word about it. The first known written record of her ride came in 1854, not from a newspaper, not from a military report, from her nephew. The first published account appeared in 1880 in a local history that few people read. A fuller version came out in 1907 in a posthumous publication of her father's memoirs. In 1935, New York State erected historical markers along what is believed to have been her route. In 1961, a bronze statue was unveiled near Carmel, New York, and in 1975, the United States Postal Service issued a bicentennial stamp in her honor. A postage stamp for riding 3 times farther than Paul Revere. Alone, in the dark. At 16, Sybil married a man named Edmund Ogden in 1784. They had a son who became a lawyer and a New York assemblyman. Edmund died of yellow fever in 1799. After that, Sybil did what she had always done. She survived. She opened and ran her own tavern. She moved to Unadilla, New York, with her son and his wife. She died on February 26, 1839. She was 77 years old. She is buried near her father in the Patterson Presbyterian Cemetery in Patterson, New York. No poem was written about her, no Longfellow, no schoolchild memorizing her name, no face on the money. History remembers who it wants to remember. It forgets who it wants to forget. And the pattern is always the same. The famous man rides 13 miles and gets a poem. The teenage girl rides 40 and gets a footnote. That is what this entire season has been about. The voices that got buried, the stories that got erased, the people who changed the world and were never told thank you. Robert Smalls stole a Confederate warship. Bass Reeves arrested 3,000 criminals in Indian Territory. Irena Sendler smuggled 2,500 children out of the Warsaw Ghetto. Mary Bowser memorized Confederate war plans from inside Jefferson Davis's own home. Claudette Colvin refused to give up her bus seat 9 months before Rosa Parks. Harriet Tubman led the first woman-commanded military operation in American history. Yasuke became the only African samurai in the history of Japan. William Kamkwamba built a windmill from junk and lit up his village. Wangari Maatai planted 51 million trees and took down a dictator. Frederick Douglass taught himself to read with chalk and a loaf of bread. James Armistead